I never thought my wife would get closure. But when she unexpectedly met her childhood tormentor decades later, she didn't run. Her brave confrontation was shocking, powerful, and life-altering. This is the story of how she took her power back. You know, they say time heals all wounds. I used to believe that, maybe because it's comforting. Then I watched Olivia come face to face with a ghost from her past. A ghost named Jessica Miller. And let me tell you, 20 years hadn't healed a thing. It had just buried it under layers of polite adulthood, waiting for the right moment to erupt. This isn't just a story about running into an old classmate. This is about the quiet, persistent damage that childhood bullying can inflict. Damage that lingers long after the scraped knees and awkward growth spurts are gone. And it's about the incredible strength it takes to finally say, no more. To understand what happened that day in the coffee shop, you need to understand the Olivia I first met. And the shadow that sometimes flickered behind her eyes, even when she smiled. When we started dating, Olivia was this vibrant, incredibly talented graphic designer. Smart, funny, fiercely loyal. But there was this undercurrent. A hesitation sometimes, a reluctance to fully take up space. A flinch at perceived criticism that seemed out of proportion. It took time and trust before she started telling me about middle school and high school. About Jessica Miller. Jessica wasn't just a mean girl. She was an architect of social misery. And Olivia, quiet, artistic, maybe a little bit naive back then, was her favorite project. It wasn't usually physical stuff though. There were occasional shoves or accidental trips. It was the insidious kind of bullying. The relentless, soul-chipping kind. I remember Olivia telling me, her voice low, about how Jessica would orchestrate moments of humiliation. Like the time Olivia poured her heart into a science fair project. This intricate model volcano. Jessica, with a syrupy sweet smile, accidentally knocked a bottle of soda all over it right before judging, ruining weeks of work. Then she feigned apologies while her friends snickered behind their hands. Olivia got a C-. Jessica won second place for something hastily assembled. There were the nicknames, cruel, targeted jabs at her appearance, or her interests. Olive Oil because she was tall and thin then. Weirdo because she preferred reading fantasy novels during lunch instead of gossiping. Jessica had this uncanny ability to make Olivia feel like she was fundamentally flawed. Like her very existence was an embarrassment. Social exclusion was Jessica's masterpiece. Parties Olivia wasn't invited to, where Jessica would make a point of loudly recounting how much fun everyone else had. Lunch tables where seats would suddenly become saved when Olivia approached. Whispering campaigns that painted Olivia as stuck-up or strange, isolating her further. Olivia told me how she'd learned to make herself small, to fade into the background. How she'd dread walking down the hallways, stomach churning, always scanning for Jessica and her clique. How the anxiety became a constant companion, leeching the joy out of things she should have loved. School, which she was academically good at, became a minefield. Even after high school, after Olivia had moved away, gone to college, built a life and a career for herself, the ghost of Jessica lingered. It manifested in Olivia's imposter syndrome, her difficulty accepting compliments, her tendency to apologize for things that weren't her fault. It was in the way she'd sometimes physically shrink back if someone raised their voice, even playfully. I saw it. I saw the legacy of those years, etched into the woman I loved. And honestly, it made me furious on her behalf. But it was her past, her pain to process. All I could do was be there, listen, and remind her of the incredible person she was now. Fast forward 20 years. We're living back in our hometown, something Olivia had mixed feelings about. But family and career opportunities had drawn us back. We have a life here, friends, a home, routines. Jessica Miller was a relic, a bad memory mostly confined to late-night conversations, or triggered by driving past the old high school. Until one Tuesday afternoon, Olivia had a rare couple of hours free. She decided to treat herself to a coffee at the Daily Grind, this slightly upscale place downtown known for its artisanal pastries and quiet corners, perfect for sketching or reading, things Olivia still loved. She told me later that she felt a prickle on the back of her neck almost as soon as she walked in. That old familiar sense of unease. She scanned the room looking for the source, and then she saw her. Jessica Miller. 20 years hadn't erased her features. Just matured. She was impeccably dressed, holding court at a small table with another woman, talking loudly on her phone, gesturing emphatically. She looked successful, confident, maybe a little brittle around the edges. Olivia thought. Olivia's first instinct was pure, gut-wrenching panic. Flee, get out before Jessica saw her. Avoid the potential awkwardness, the dredging up of old pain. Her hand was literally on the door handle to leave. But then something stopped her. Maybe it was the years of therapy, maybe it was the life she'd built, the confidence she'd painstakingly earned. Maybe it was just sheer exhaustion from carrying that weight for 2 decades. Or maybe, she told me, it was watching Jessica on the phone, complaining loudly about some minor inconvenience with an air of oblivious entitlement, that just snapped something inside her. This woman, who had wielded cruelty like a weapon, seemed to have sailed through life completely untouched by the ripples of pain she'd caused. And Olivia, standing there, heart hammering against her ribs, suddenly felt an overwhelming need not for revenge, not for drama, but for acknowledgement, for the record to be set straight, if only for herself. She told me she took a deep breath, smoothed down her jacket, and walked towards the table. Every step felt like wading through cement. The background noise of the coffee shop seemed to fade into a dull roar. Jessica ended her call with a theatrical sigh just as Olivia reached the table. She looked up, a polite, slightly impatient smile fixed on her face. The kind you give a barista who's taking too long. There wasn't a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Can I help you?" Jessica asked, her tone dripping with that same subtle condescension Olivia remembered so well. Olivia's voice, when it came out, was steadier than she expected. Jessica Miller." Jessica's brow furrowed slightly. "Yes, do I know you?" The casual dismissal, the complete lack of recognition, it was almost worse than the bullying itself. It meant Olivia hadn't even registered as a person worth remembering. "It's Olivia," she said, keeping her voice level. "Olivia Evans. We went to Northwood High together." Recognition dawned slowly, then morphed into a sort of strained, superficial brightness. "Oh, Olivia. Wow, long time no see, you look different." Jessica's eyes did a quick, assessing sweep. It wasn't entirely friendly. "It has been a long time," Olivia agreed. Her heart was still pounding, but a strange calm was settling over her. This wasn't about crumbling anymore. This was about standing her ground. "I wanted to ask you something, Jessica." Jessica glanced at her friend, a silent communication passing between them. She looked back at Olivia, wary now. "Okay, do you remember middle school, high school?" Olivia asked, her gaze unwavering. Jessica gave a little uncomfortable laugh. "Vaguely. It was ages ago, wasn't it? God, we were just kids." "We were kids," Olivia acknowledged. "But the things you did weren't just kid stuff. Do you remember the science fair project you ruined? Do you remember the names you called me? The way you and your friends made sure I ate lunch alone almost every day for 2 years?" The air around the table crackled. Jessica's friend looked acutely uncomfortable, suddenly fascinated by her coffee cup. Jessica's polite mask slipped, her face tightened, a flush creeping up her neck. "Look, I don't really know what you're talking about," Jessica stammered, her voice losing its earlier confidence. "High school was a blur. We all did stupid things. Kids can be cruel, you know, and that was it. The minimization, the deflection, the refusal to take any responsibility. It was the same tactic, just wrapped in adult language." This is the part where the old Olivia might have backed down, mumbled an apology for bringing it up, and fled. But the Olivia standing there now wasn't that girl anymore. "No, Jessica," Olivia said, her voice quiet but firm, cutting through the cafe chat. People at nearby tables were starting to subtly glance over. "This wasn't just kids being cruel, this was targeted. You went out of your way repeatedly to make my life miserable. And I need you to understand something. It didn't just stop when we graduated." She took another. "For years after, I struggled. I doubted myself constantly. I felt ashamed for just existing sometimes. Your words, your actions, they had a lasting impact. They contributed to years of anxiety and low self-esteem that I had to work incredibly hard to overcome. I spent years feeling small because you made me feel small." Olivia wasn't shouting. She wasn't crying. She was simply stating facts, laying the truth bare between them. The power in her voice wasn't anger. It was the quiet, unshakable force of someone finally speaking their reality after decades of silence. Jessica looked genuinely stunned. Her mouth opened and closed a couple of times. The defensiveness seemed to crumble, replaced by something else. Confusion, disbelief, maybe, just maybe, a flicker of shame. She looked around, suddenly aware of the attention they were drawing. "I had no idea," Jessica whispered, finally. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the first crack in the facade. "I honestly don't remember half of that I wasn't very happy back then either, you know." It was a weak attempt to share the blame, perhaps. But Olivia didn't engage with it. "That wasn't the point. Maybe you don't remember," Olivia said softly. "Or maybe you chose to forget. But I remembered. I lived with it. And I just needed you to hear it. I needed to say it." And with that, Olivia turned and walked away. She didn't look back. She walked out of the coffee shop, hands trembling slightly, but head held high. She told me later it felt like shedding a skin, leaving something heavy and suffocating behind on that cafe floor. She didn't wait for a tearful apology, or a grand gesture of reconciliation. She didn't need Jessica's validation anymore. The victory wasn't in making Jessica feel bad. It was in reclaiming her own story, in speaking her truth directly to the source of that old pain, and in realizing that Jessica's opinion, her memory, her reaction, none of it defined Olivia anymore. When Olivia got home that day, she was shaken. Yes, reliving those moments, even in the telling, brought back a phantom echo of the old hurt. But underneath the tremor there was something new, a lightness, a sense of profound release. She told me the whole story, sitting on our couch, sipping tea, and I saw it in her eyes. The shadow wasn't gone entirely, because scars remain, but it had receded. It no longer held the same power. Did it change everything? In a way, yes. It didn't magically erase the past, but it fundamentally changed Olivia's relationship with her past. It was like closing a chapter, not by pretending it didn't exist, but by writing the final definitive paragraph herself. In the weeks and months that followed, I noticed subtle shifts. Olivia seemed to stand taller, literally. She spoke up more readily in meetings at work. She accepted compliments with a simple thank you, instead of deflecting. She started a new painting series, bolder and more vibrant than anything she'd done before. It was as if confronting that ghost had unlocked a new level of confidence, a deeper ownership of her own work. She never saw Jessica Miller again, not that I know of, and it doesn't matter. Jessica's role in Olivia's story was over, finally and truly put to rest by Olivia's own courage. So yeah, time doesn't always heal all wounds. Sometimes, healing requires facing the source of the wound, not for their sake, but for yours. It requires speaking truth to power, even if that power is just a faded memory embodied by someone sipping coffee. Olivia's confrontation wasn't about changing Jessica, it was about changing herself, and watching her find that strength, reclaim her narrative after 20 long years. Well, that's a story I'll never forget. It reminds me that the bravest acts often aren't loud or explosive, but quiet moments of profound courage, where we decide finally to stand up for the person we were, and the person we've become.